My dad works in B2B marketing, but I never really knew what that meant. Then one day my dad came by my school for career day and told everyone in my class he was a big ROAS man. Then he just kept saying things like, the bigger the ROAS, the better, over and over. My friends still laugh at me to this day. I think it means calculating a return on ad spend. One thing's for sure, I'll be known as the ROAS man's kid for the rest of my days. Why couldn't you just be a fireman or a lawyer? Why? You ruined my life, Dad.
Not everyone gets B2B, but LinkedIn has the people who do. And with ads on LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people based on job title, industry, likelihood to buy, and more. Start converting your B2B audience into high-quality leads today. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
This episode is brought to you by Microsoft Azure. Turn your ideas into reality with an Azure free account. Get everything you need to develop apps across cloud and hybrid environments, scale workloads, create cloud-connected mobile experiences, and so much more. Discover what you can create with popular services free for 12 months. Learn more at azure.com. That's AZURE.com. And sign up for a free account to start building in the cloud today.
Welcome to Storylines Live, the only podcast that explores the meaning and the power of the most important story in business. The one that answers why somebody should buy from you, work for you, invest in you, or partner with you. This is the story that defines the very character and nature of an organization. At WordWrite, we call it your capital S story. In each episode, we feature guests who have great insights on business storytelling, who can share their experience and key learnings to help you and your business do a better job of sharing your capital S story to deliver remarkable business results. In this episode, we're honored to have Stephen Steers as our guest. Stephen has a very fascinating business that's focused on storytelling. Can you guess why he's on Storylines Live? Stephen works with professional services firms, and he'll explain what kind are in his sweet spot to help them tell stories, get their customers excited to buy. Now, I'm pulling this from Stephen's website, and I know he's going to explain that, so that they can increase close rates by 25% plus, pipeline by 182%, and revenue 3x in 12 months. Holy cow. Similar results guaranteed. You don't see that on websites very often. Now, one of the things about Stephen is he lays it out there. Really, they don't teach you how to sell in school, right? They don't teach you how to be confident. They don't teach you how to be out in the world and to make a way for yourself, but that's what he does. Now, this is amazing. Stephen's consulted, advised, or led workshops for more than 750 companies from 30 different countries. Buckle up your seatbelts, folks, and forget what you think you know about sales and salespeople. It's all about listening, learning, and connecting through stories. And Stephen's here to tell us all about that today. Welcome, Stephen, to Storylines Live.
Thank you for having me, Paul. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Awesome. Anything I missed in your bio that you think our audience should know about you?
I would add, I've updated the bio just a hair. The closing line says, stories close the sale, never the conversation.
Whoa. Now I love that. Stories close the sale. Never the conversation.
Yep.
Brilliant
That'd
line,
be it.
my friend. I love it. I can tell already we're going to have a great conversation.
I've been excited for this.
Yeah. Our stock and trade is the capital S story, the one that answers those four fundamental questions. And we give it that capital S, Stephen, because the answers to those questions stand above all the other questions that a business leader needs to answer. Why would somebody buy from you, work for you, invest in you, or partner with you? In your business and your work today, which of those four is most important to you right now?
I think why someone would invest in me for the simple fact of so I want to take it back to, and I'll explain it in the form of a story, right? I believe the whole reason we tell a story is to help others better tell their own story. So by investing in me, you're investing in the outcomes that I can help you to get. and you're investing in yourself. So I think if we use the word investment, that means there is an implied ROI. And so I like that thinking because that's what I want to put out to people and demonstrate how storytelling, how the other frameworks, and how sales can lead to a good ROI from any investment. So that's, I think, the one I would like people to remember when they think of me.
Love that. That is also very important to us as well. Our work with our clients is an investment, typically in growing the business, right?
Yes,
Sometimes it's
absolutely.
about helping them find the right talent, et cetera, et cetera. That's it. That's great. Now, we all have our own personal stories. And before we started recording today, folks, we were talking about that a little bit, Stephen and I. But Stephen, how does your personal story influence what you do today?
Oh, it's everything, man. I have two really incisive moments. I'll give you a choice, dealer's choice today, Paul. I'll give you the lowest moment of my life or a near-death experience that put me on a trajectory.
Wait a minute, your lowest moment wasn't a near-death experience?
It was not. No, they're very different at very different times.
Oh my God, so hard to pick. Tragedy or tragedy? Tragedy or tragedy, right? All right, let's go with tragedy.
Which one? Which one?
Oh, that would be the lowest point, I guess.
The lowest point. Okay. So when I graduated college, this was during the last recession.
Yes.
And there was no work at all. I applied to maybe 300 or 400 jobs and there was just nothing. I wasn't getting any responses. So I did the only thing I could do, which was just walk around to bars and restaurants, knock on doors, hand out resumes, and hope someone would call me back. Eventually somebody did. And I got this job at a restaurant bar called the Charleston, which is in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. That's where I'm from, New York City.
Wow.
So I got a job being a bar back there, which is a glorified janitor, sweeping the floors, cleaning the bathrooms, changing the kegs, washing the cups, doing all the ugly work. And part of my job there, I worked on Sundays at 8 p.m. to 4 a.m.
Jeez.
And I had the lovely, lovely part of my shift where I had to take out the trash from all day Friday, all day Saturday, and all day Sunday.
Wow.
So in the back of the bar, there's this small alleyway. It's a very, very thin area where they put back about 6 trash cans worth of trash piled 3 trash cans high.
Oh boy.
You have to squeeze yourself past a 55-gallon drum of spent fryer oil. And so I'm doing this, I'm moving this back and forth. I'm down to my last bag in this last trash can and I'm picking it out. It's just not coming out of the trash can. It's not coming out. I'm yanking as hard as I can. Then I squat down, I pull up my pants real high so I can get some leverage and I pull that thing and it pops out and there was a handle of liquor, which is why it was stuck, and it clips the edge of the 54-gallon drum of fryer oil, which goes over onto me and into the bar and covers the entire bar with oil. Like, thankfully it wasn't hot, but you ever know, like when you have those moments where you just mess up so much, you just start sweating.
Yes.
And that was one of those moments. And then like, I was like, man, I guess I'm going to quit. And as I dropped the bag of trash to walk in and tell the bartender that I quit, it was clear in my head. I was like, oh, you don't have another job. You don't have anybody you could work with. You have nowhere else you can go. What do you get? You have to stay here. And like, that was like that, just like quick lightning, like depression, sadness, really low point. And then somewhere in there, I don't know where it came from, was like, hey, you're going to have something. You're going to build something really great for yourself. Just use this as a building block. So when I say, how does that inform what I do? One, I work for myself. I've been blessed to be able to do that, but it's very present to me where I came from and what I was doing, 10, 15 years ago. And like, I don't want to go back to doing that. So everything I do, every relationship I build, every customer and client I work with, it's always like, hey, I'm going to give you everything I got because I know where I came from. So I think that's one of the ways it informs.
That's awesome. Now, I'm sorry, but you polluted my brain. You have to tell the audience the near-death experience too.
Near-death experience. Okay. So after I got done with that bar job, I started working in the construction business. So I had a family friend who got me in to work half in the office, half in the field. And we built huge buildings in New York City. So we built Tower 1 of the World Trade Center. We did Tower 4 of the World Trade Center. We redesigned the UN. We built huge 50, 60-story buildings that take 4 or 5 years. And so one of the buildings I worked on was the Baccarat Hotel. It's on 53rd Street and 6th Avenue. And I worked on this project since it was a hole in the ground. And the timing of this story is the building is basically completed.
Right.
And people are moving into their $30 and $40 million apartments. And we're just doing punch list finish work stuff. So I arrive on site with my foreman. I'm wearing jeans, a t-shirt, and some sneakers because it's not really a construction site at this point.
Yep.
And the people in the building take exception to seeing all your construction gear. So they didn't want us to wear as much, right? So I walked the entire building from the 45th floor down to the construction entrance with my foreman. No incidents. We get to the construction entrance, which is a triple height floor.
Yeah.
We're talking, we're having a laugh. We just worked 45 stories. We're going to go to lunch. He shows me pictures of his new kitchen on his phone, having a laugh about it. Then he taps me on the right shoulder and says, hey, let's go to lunch. And I take one step forward and a cement block falls directly where I was standing. Like literally, I missed it by that much.
Oh my gosh.
Because someone was chopping out the wall on the other side and hadn't marked it out.
Oh.
And so I'm shaking. I'm like completely just in disbelief. And the foreman, his name is Kenny. We're still in touch to this day. And he's Panamanian. He's like, Papa, not everybody gets a chance like that. You're here for something. And I was like, huh. And I was like, hey, I'm not hungry now. And I just went on a 2-hour long walk through New York City, back to my office. Thankfully I could do that. And I was still alive. And it came to the conclusion I was going to die one day. Obviously, you know that, but it was right there in front of me.
Yes.
10 minutes before. And I was like, well, you're going to die one day. If you're going to die, you might as well die doing something that you want to do and bring something you think should exist into the world. And I'd always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I always wanted to have my own company. Didn't know what to sell or what to do, but I always fancied myself decent with people. So I said, hey, let me jump into a company in a sales role and learn. And that's been my story. So that's affected everything that I've done. And I'm not here for a long time necessarily, but I'm definitely damn sure going to make sure it's worth it.
Well, those are two really awesome stories, folks. As you can see, Stephen is a great storyteller, and you have some great stories to share.
Thank you, Paul.
At WordWrite, we have a take on story, and we focus on what we call that capital S story for the organization. I'm curious, Stephen, your work in sales is all about storytelling. How did that happen? Why did you decide to focus on storytelling in sales?
So in my work starting as a sales rep, I even saw people were just teaching me to pitch the product. And you got to know your product, whatever it is, you got to know it. There's no question. It just wasn't landing well.
Yes.
And like, you could see the gap, but I was like, maybe I should go further into more features in the product, which obviously didn't work even worse.
Yes.
And then I remember like just talking about what another client did one time with this particular feature. And I saw someone's eyes perk up and I was like, I just took a note of that. Slowly, I then started getting into consulting. It still hadn't clicked yet. And then when I started working with lots of founders in earlier stage companies, it was like, oh, you guys stink at this. You guys are terrible at this. I need to redirect you. And I was like, what do people buy when they buy something? Like, oh, well, we sell this widget that does this. It's like, no, they buy the outcome that your widget allows them to get to.
Yes.
I don't care about your widget. And the way I drive that point home is I say, hey, if you went running and got lost in the desert and you come to a clearing and I have a food cart there, even if you have a very strict diet and I make beef sandwiches and I have water, are you going to say, hey, is this artisanal beef? Like, what's the progeny of this cow?
Yes.
Is this artisanal water from the mountains of Fiji? Now, you may care about that, but not right now. You want to slake your thirst and satiate your hunger.
Exactly.
That's exactly how you need to sell things. And I think stories is one of the best ways because it's social proof that somebody else has taken part in the results and concepts that you have without you saying, hey, I'm great at this. It's just much more trust. So those are some of the things. But yeah, people stunk at it. And I was like, hey, this is a way easier way to start a conversation with a person than saying, hey, I can improve your sales, because people don't like salespeople. So I think storytelling is a nice, softer on-ramp to get people's attention and give them something valuable that they're very visibly not doing well.
Just dropping the knowledge bombs there, Stephen. That's all really good stuff. Great stories and great insights. Folks, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with Stephen Steers talking about the power of storytelling in sales. Thanks for being with us today on this episode of Storylines Live. Hang tight.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Robbie Samuels hosts the On the Schmooze podcast. Robbie, tell listeners what to expect from the show.
Since 2015, I've interviewed entrepreneurs who overcame challenges to achieve success in their field or industry. Tune in to On the Schmooze to listen as I ask deep questions to elicit untold stories about leadership and networking.
And where can people subscribe?
Find the show at ontheschmooze.com or on marketingpodcast.net, or just search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard them. Go subscribe.
Folks, we're back with Stephen Steers talking about the power of storytelling in sales. Thanks for being with us today on this episode of Storylines Live, the only podcast that explores the power and the meaning of the most important story in business, the one that answers why somebody should buy from you, work for you, invest in you, or partner with you. At WordWrite, we call that your capital S story. So let's chat with a master storyteller here, Stephen. How do you and your organization help the people and the businesses you serve?
Yeah, I love the question. A lot of people now are using AI tools all over and across their business for good and for not so good, as we kind of discussed before we got on the call here today with the recording. I'm seeing a lot of people leverage AI tools like Fathom, Gong, Fireflies, and many others to record Otter, right? Mm-hmm. They record their sales calls with these tools. These tools are great. They give you great summaries, tell you who talked more, etc. Maybe some tone stuff, but they cannot tell you what it is that you missed, where you could improve, and that actual contextual element of what it needs to make it really go for a person. Like as we started the conversation here today, Paul, I believe we're humans solving human problems in a business context. And so what I do is I help add the context that AI can't give you. AI can find the best information that already exists. It can't create information that doesn't exist and tell you where to put it in there. And so what I do, my specialty is I review people's sales calls, sales teams, and I help them put stories into a very specific place in sales calls that builds deeper rapport, creates connection, and allows you to talk about the outcomes you can help people to achieve instead of just pushing your product. And in some cases, been able to increase close rates about 25% by doing that, which is super fun.
Yeah, really. And as I mentioned at the top of the episode, quoting from your website, your statistics are really great, and your willingness to put them out there and say that you're willing to guarantee results that people do as you help them to learn to do, right? That is just really, really great. Now, you mentioned before we took our break that you got into sales, but I imagine you didn't start working for yourself right away. You worked for somebody else, right? So what led you to start your company, and when did you start it?
The whole vision of getting into sales was so I could have my own company, period. Mm-hmm. That was the whole reason. I was like, if I'm going to have a business, I may not be able to code or know what to sell, but if I know how to sell, I'll always have a business. So that was my impetus for saying, hey, sales is the thing. And I thought it was the fastest path. And, you can make some money doing sales too, which is okay.
Yes.
But I think that it's really important that one isolates why they're doing something.
Yes.
And so I didn't want to go back to being a bar back. That was I don't want to say it's still a present fear, but I really know what I don't want to be doing. And so when I was working inside of one of these companies, I saw I kind of probably maxed out most of the learning I could have gotten from that group, especially in startups. There's a big knowledge gap.
Yes.
And I was like, well, this is weird. Let me incorporate and get myself into this mode. So I incorporated, and then I would take on a couple of freelance projects, very light, very dipping my toe in the water. And then when I got into consulting, I had this entity, and that just became how I would get paid, which was very good for me. And then at the end of 2019, it was finally hey, I'm going to jump in and do this. And so I just went full time into doing this, and that's had many ups and many downs. 2020 was a very difficult year to really be kicking things off. Started 2020 like a rocket, had speaking gigs in Turkey and keynoting in New York, great pipeline. And then things almost cratered into the ground and I almost lost the whole thing. Yeah. But I was able to come back from it. But I just generally say, why did I start it? It's because that was the vision in the first place. Mm-hmm. And I was on the trajectory and on task, and I knew why I wanted to do it and what I was hoping it would be. which it has been all that, much more, and much less. But
Yeah.
the man it has made me into, I can't argue with.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, I think just generally for entrepreneurs, you know, business is more of a roller coaster ride than it is, you know, a straight upward trajectory, right? And that's one of the lessons I think that all of us who start businesses have to learn sooner or later. You know, in terms of sales, if anybody in the audience gets on the internet and just punches into Google sales training or something like that, a related phrase. I mean, it is such a crowded field.
Yes.
To you, Stephen, what makes what you do different than your competitors?
Love the question. One, you get me, which my competitors don't have. Let's start there.
There you go.
But I think a couple of things. One is I'm not selling you on it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to show you what the opportunity is, and if we're aligned, let's work. I'm a very much a consultative seller. I'm not a pushy type of guy. So I'd say that's one difference. The other thing is I have some data behind how this works and what results we've got for people. And I don't work with people I can't help. So where I say I have a guarantee, it's like, I'm going to tell you if we can work together and if I could do this or if not. I'm not just trying to grab a customer. The other thing is, and another quick story as well, the reason I think I'm good to work with is because I was on the other side of being part of organizations that did not train their salespeople.
Oh, yes.
So much to the point where I got the first startup I'd actually worked at, I got let go. Company was going through some tough stuff. And I was walking out of the meeting, you know, the HR woman comes in and your head of the department comes in. I was like, oh, I know what's happening.
Yeah.
So I get the axe. And as I'm walking out, I go to shake the founder's hand because he was walking past and he just blew me off. And I was like, oh, okay, that's weird. But all right, I guess I'm done with this company. Let me go back and pick up the pieces of my life.
Yes.
And so I go say bye to everybody else in the company. And then I walk out of the company, you know, to pick up the pieces. And my phone goes off as I'm walking back to the J train in New York City. And I get an email from that founder. I'm going to have to find it really quickly. Here's what it says. It says, I just realized I brushed past you on the way out. I spilled coffee all over myself right before, so I was not particularly present. Sorry about that. Anyway, I just wanted to let you know that you got the short end of the stick a lot here with respect to territory, vertical, and management. Too little, too late for sure, but apologies nonetheless. I hope your experience here was generally good outside of that.
Wow.
I think with the right support, you can and will be an excellent seller should you choose to continue in that capacity. In any case, good luck with whatever comes next. I'm happy to be a reference for you should you need one. So that is why I do what I do, because I think founders like this are the worst type of people, because you knew that it wasn't working great and you didn't do anything about it. So like, that's my why. It's like, I want to make sure that founders and people who have sales teams know, hey, we got to train our people, because not only are they there to make us money, they're giving us part of their life and their time and their skills and their energy, and they're a resource for us. We have to invest in these resources. So if you're a founder that's like that, hey, you should change, because people are trusting you with their career. And I think I've left a lot of money on the table being part of situations like that. But again, I learned and I got a great story out of it as well. So I'm past it. But that's why people should work with me, because I've been there on the other side and seen exactly what it's like when it doesn't work well. So that's why I get up in the morning early to put that type of stuff back out into the world, so that people can I can be the help I didn't have.
That's really great, Stephen. Such great stories you're sharing with us. Really appreciate it. I think this is kind of self-evident, but I always like to ask this question. You know, we're also big believers in why you do what you do. Simon Sinek, in his work, his first book, Start With Why, is one of the taproots for our story process, as well as the work of Carl Jung and the collective unconscious, and Joseph Campbell and his work in mythology. But in terms of the why, I love the line from Sinek's original TEDx talk. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it, right?
Yes.
And you've given us a good sense of the why there. What brings you the most satisfaction in the work you do?
Oof, this is a big one, man. Can I give two answers?
Absolutely.
Okay, so the first is seeing people's eyes light up when they realize they can actually like make some of the changes. Like, so when sales is a 4-letter word for most people,
Yes.
and they don't like it, it's caused a lot of friction and stress in them. And if I can help them make it a little more approachable and maybe even fun some ways, that really gives me a lot of joy. That's on the client side. Personally, it's the fact that I've built something that I dreamed about decades ago when I was cleaning a bar in Brooklyn.
Yes.
And I had nothing. Like, that gives me immense satisfaction that I built a life of freedom and I could make the choices of who I work with, how I spend my time. That it's infinite upside that I've been able to start to build in. And that gives me a ton of satisfaction.
Stephen, that is just so awesome. You have shared so much with the audience today. But I always ask this question too. I think it's really important. Is there anything that you hope to talk about, to share with the audience today that I haven't asked you about?
No, I think we've covered it. You've been asking great questions today, Paul.
Well, thanks. My folks, most of you don't know this. My original degree is in broadcast journalism, so I ought to be able to conduct an interview.
Smashed it. One of the few people using their degree for good use these days.
That's right. If I don't, people will let me know, I think. Stephen, how can people best reach you?
I'm easy to find on all the socials. Stephen Steers, Stephen with a PH. And if you want to go over a sales call or have a good sales call script, you can find it at my website, stephensteers.com/call script. And you can download that and use it, put a good script to use. It'll tell you where there's some storytelling opportunities. And other than that, just say hi wherever you find me.
That's awesome, Stephen. Really, really appreciate you being with us on this episode. I think we're going to have you back sometime in the near future, because you just really dropped a lot of knowledge bombs, as I said, and you have great stories to share. Such a big topic, because as you pointed out, either you're not getting the sales training, and which is weird because there's so much out there, and it's really all about that story, learning how to explain to those you're selling to how you can help them get that outcome that they're looking for, right?
That's it. That
Steve,
is the bridge.
Thanks again for being on this episode. Really appreciate it. And thanks to all of you in our audience for joining us for this episode of Storylines Live, the only podcast that explores the power and the meaning of the most important story in business, the one that answers why somebody would buy from you, work for you, invest in you, or partner with you. We call this your capital S story. See you next time on another episode of Storylines Live.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christy Heiler hosts a fantastic podcast called Own It. Christy, tell us more about the show.
Own It is all about celebrating women and non-binary advertising agency owners. We talk about buying out of the Boys Club of Advertising because less than 1% of ad agencies are owned by women.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find the podcast at untilyouownit.com. We're also on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net. And of course, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.